Welcome to Midweek Mysteries, and thank you for being here. I'm your host, Nick Ryan. If you're new to the show, Midweek Mysteries is our shorter version of our full-length Sunday episodes, where we enjoy giving a personal shout-out to our newest supporters, so be sure to tune in. If you're interested in supporting the podcast, you can become a patron at patreon.com/paranormalmysteries. Or if you prefer to make a one-time donation, please visit buymeacoffee.com/paranormal. And as always, subscribing to the podcast and sharing it with your friends is one of the best ways to show your support, and we appreciate it. Now, let's see what today's storytellers have to say. Today's first midweek mystery comes to us from Kelly. Kelly's story is called Civil War Spirits. Kelly says, "Hi Nick. I live in a rural area in South Carolina. I have lived in this area my entire life. I am writing to tell you an experience that may involve Civil War spirits on our property. I come from a farming family. We have a lot of land that has been passed down for at least 4 generations. When my husband and I decided to marry, we cleared some wooded area on my family's property for our home. To give some context for our location, we are surrounded by hayfields and forests. It is more than a quarter mile to our nearest neighbor and at least a 15-minute drive to the nearest store. Since we have been in our home, we have experienced a few unexplained events. For a period of several months, I would be startled awake several times a week by a loud bang on our bedroom window, which was right next to the bed. It would always occur between 5 and 6 o'clock in the morning. When the banging woke me up, I would get up and look out the window, then go to the back door and check the backyard, but there was never anything there. I am a bit of a light sleeper, so it always woke me up. My husband, on the other hand, sleeps very deeply, and he never heard it, so I thought it might be my imagination, or part of a recurring dream. However, I've never had recurring dreams, and the fact that this happened at the same time each morning seemed strange. After a couple of months, the banging on the window ceased. Several months later, I came home from work and went to my bedroom to change out of my work clothes. I was alone in the house, but it was getting close to the time for my husband to arrive home from work. While I was in my bedroom, I distinctly heard someone open the door on the side of the house, then footsteps walking through our dining area and into the kitchen. This would be the way that my husband would come in after work, so I naturally assumed it was him. As I heard the footsteps reach the kitchen, I received a text message from my husband that said he was on his way home from work. I was very alarmed to know that it wasn't him that I had heard in the house, so I went to see who was in the kitchen. As I walked into that part of the house, no one was there. I have many family members that live nearby, and they often stop by and walk into the house without knocking, so I checked the yard and road in front of the house, but there was no one around. It also would have been unusual for a family member to come in and not announce themselves. A while after this incident, my husband was walking our dog in the hayfield next to our house. At the back of the field, he saw a round metal object sticking out of the ground. He dug it up and brought it back to the house. The place where he found this item is only about 300 yards from our home. When he showed it to me, he said that he thought it was a Civil War cannonball. I was skeptical. There has been a lot of farm equipment on that part of the property for many years, and I thought it may be a piece that fell off a tractor. He said he didn't know of any part of a tractor that would look like this piece he found. He looked up images of Civil War cannonballs, and the item he found seemed to match. Just to be sure, I asked him to show the item to my dad. My dad is 73 years old and has farmed his whole life. He has operated and maintained all sorts of farm equipment. I felt confident that he would know if this item was a piece of machinery. When we showed the item to my dad, he said it wasn't any piece from farm equipment and agreed that it seemed to be a Civil War cannonball. We kept the cannonball and put it on our mantle with some other unique items we have collected over the years. About a week after bringing the cannonball into our home, I got up early one morning to walk our dog. My husband was up getting ready for work. When I came back from walking the dog, my husband looked at me strangely and seemed to be confused. I asked him what was going on. He asked me if I had returned to the house shortly after I had left with the dog. I told him that I hadn't. He said that while I was gone, he was in the kitchen fixing his breakfast when he heard 3 very loud knocks on our side door. The door was still locked from the night, so he assumed I had forgotten something and had come back early from walking the dog. However, when he opened the door, no one was there. He checked the yard, and no one was in the yard either. It was about 10 minutes later when I returned with the dog. My husband was pretty freaked out. This was the first time he had experienced anything unexplained in the house. I would also like to say that although I enjoy paranormal stories, I am a skeptic at heart. I always look for a logical explanation first, and I don't make a big deal out of things I can't readily explain. I am a teacher, and my husband is a police officer. We are both very grounded, logical thinkers, but we were unable to explain the events that I have described. I also want to include that we have several pieces of furniture and other items in our home that belonged to grandparents and great-grandparents that have passed away, so I'm not sure if these could be a family member passing through or something connected to the land. Since most of the events seem to originate outside of the home, banging on the walls and the windows and door, I'm more inclined to think that it's something from the land, especially after my husband's cannonball find. We continue to occasionally hear footsteps in the house when no one is there, and sometimes hear movement in empty rooms, but nothing that we have experienced has felt scary or threatening. So, when these events occur, we kind of shrug our shoulders and go on with life. I enjoy listening to your podcast. It's so interesting to hear the experiences of others. I hope that you will be able to use my story. I also plan to email a picture of the item that my husband found, so you can decide for yourself if it looks like a Civil War cannonball. Our next midweek mystery of the night comes from Mattie. Mattie's story is called Hunt Avenue Haunting. Mattie says, "Hi Nick, I love your podcast, and this is one of my only unfriendly ghost experiences. It happened to my grandma and dad, and I have their permission to share their story. I'm telling the encounter from my grandmother's point of view. I saw one once when we were living on Hunt Avenue. The girls were between 4 and 6, in a bedroom near the toy room. Dad and I had the middle room, and Ron, who was 2, had the room next to the bathroom. One night something woke me up, and I saw what I thought was Michelle or Jen walking toward the bathroom. I was puzzled, though, because neither of them had a white nightgown. I waited to hear the toilet flush, but no noises and no lights came on. I then heard Ron screaming, 'Witch! Witch!' I ran to his room to see him cowering in his crib, pointing at the door as he screamed repeatedly, 'Witch!' I calmed him down and held him until he fell asleep, and then I dashed to the girls' room, where I found both of them snuggled down in deep sleeps in their colorful print pajamas. I headed back to bed in a hyper state of curiosity. My mind was swirling with possibilities. All I could think of was the headstones in our backyard. The previous owners cut the lawn at Queens River Baptist Church, and they had taken 7 or 8 stones to build a retaining wall to keep rainwater out of the basement. There was a mother, a father, and a 7-day-old son among the stones. Was the mother coming to take my son in place of her infant? Thank you so much for having such a beautiful platform to share this on." Our next story of the night also comes from Mattie. Mattie says, "My whole family has many ghost sightings, almost all friendly ones, but still just as creepy. My whole family loves dogs. While this encounter had been taking place, my dog Edna had died in the last year, and we had gotten our new dog, Teddy, to be a friend to our other dog, Stella. I was awake, and it was pretty late at night. I couldn't sleep no matter how hard I tried, so I was up reading one of my library books. Then I heard some scratching and whining at the door. I got up, saved my page, and opened the door. Stella and Teddy were standing at the door. I pet each dog, then they both ran downstairs. I saw and heard both of them run down the stairs. I went back to bed and shut off my light, in the hopes of going to sleep. 1 or 2 minutes into trying to fall asleep, I heard more scratching and whining. We don't have cats or mice or other dogs apart from Stella and Teddy. I was terrified. I slowly put my blankets over my head and said a silent prayer to Edna, telling her that I loved her and that I was kind of terrified. The noises went away, but I still felt something in my room. Stella has passed away now, but Teddy is still alive. Stella is still watching over me, though. I can feel it. Our next story of the night comes from Morgan. Morgan's story is called The Djinn. Morgan says, I am writing this on behalf of my husband, with his permission. When he was 14, his family moved from Canada to Syria, his parents' homeland. They had just arrived back home to Syria. They had been there a week, staying with his friends down the road from their house, as they were waiting for some renovations to be completed before they could move in. Late one summer evening, my husband's mom had asked him to please go check on the house renovations and make sure everything was okay. This was not unusual, and they did this every night, but he never went alone. As he walked down the street, he passed an old abandoned house, situated midway between the house being renovated and the house he was staying at. To his surprise, the old abandoned house was all lit up. There was a large gathering happening. Every light in the house was on. Music, people talking, dancing, etc. My husband thought that a new family must have moved in that day and were celebrating. Just as he was passing, a beautiful lady was leaning out of the door, calling to my husband, "Come in, please come, have some tea." Being in the Middle East, this is not uncommon, and it's considered disrespectful or rude if you do not accept. My husband nodded and told her that he just had to check on his house down the road and would stop in on his way back. My husband checked his house, made sure the doors were locked, and started to make his way back towards the party. When he arrived, it was dark and vacant again. He was so scared and unsure of what had just happened that he ran back to the house where he and his family were staying and rushed to tell his mother. His mother was so panicked. She knew it was the Djinn. These are spirits or supernatural beings known in the area for being tricksters and sometimes demonic, luring young men. His mother was so worried that the spirit now had her eyes set on her son that she made him sleep in the Jama or mosque for almost a week. A few months later, he and his family returned to Canada, and he never saw the spirit lady again. Our next midweek mystery comes to us from Darina. Darina's story is called UFO Close Encounter. Darina says, I have been binging the entire podcast at work and plucked up the courage to share my own UFO experience. I had never been an avid believer in UFOs or ETs. I like the paranormal as a casual observer, but I don't necessarily consider every story that I've heard to be true. I preferred to live on Occam's razor, and it suited me well. This happened about 8 years ago, and it still haunts me almost every single day. I questioned everything I ever learned after this experience, because truth really is stranger than fiction. It was a typical drive home from work. I worked the late shift, so typically I'd be arriving home at right around 2 a.m. That particular night, I had taken my friend home who lived in a nearby city, so it was a little later than usual. At the same time, I was perfectly sober, albeit a little tired after a long shift. My neighborhood is situated in a very secluded suburban area. The road to get there is a small 2-lane mainway, lined with small businesses and houses. It's on a peninsula, so the entire area is surrounded by water. As I'm making my way around a bend, only about 10 minutes from home, I notice a red light blinking somewhere in the distance that I'd never noticed before. It was undulating in a non-rhythmic way. It looked similar to one you might see on a radio tower, but the closest cell tower was nearly 5 miles farther down the road. It caught my eye through the tree line, and I was fixated on it as I made my way toward the Baptist church. Just as I passed the entrance to the parking lot, my jaw dropped, and I realized I wasn't looking at a blinking light. A whole airship was idly floating above the steeple of the church, about 100 yards in front of me. My brain staggered to a halt as I tried to process what I was looking at. I began yelling aloud, "What the hell is that? What the actual hell?" I was so shaken by what I was looking at, I slowed my car to a stop in the middle of the road. I was now sitting directly in front of the church, staring up at a humongous blimp-like airship. It was long and oblong-shaped, with no visible wings or propellers. It had several large vent-like lights protruding off of the side that flooded the front lawn of the church with a bright, ambient glow. I scanned the area below the blimp for strings or rope, thinking that the church had some weird celebration of Jesus taking place. As I sat there flummoxed, one muddled thought suddenly swam its way to the surface of my brain. I should get a picture. I dove for my BlackBerry, but realized it was futile because it barely had a megapixel camera, and imagined the mockery I'd befall trying to show people a grainy blob on my 4-inch screen. My DSLR camera was in the trunk of my car, so I just had to pull into the church parking lot to get it out. As I was processing all of this, my eyes were still fixated on the airship. It began lazily floating toward me, no sounds of humming or engines to be heard. I swung my car around to go back to the parking lot, but as soon as I began the U-turn, the ship suddenly shot off into the night sky, faster than I've ever seen anything travel. 1 second it was there, the next, it was gone. I slammed my foot on the gas, thinking maybe I could follow it. I directed my gaze upwards, trying to catch a glimpse of it, but it was gone. I slowed my car and made another U-turn, still flush with adrenaline, to head home. I was shaking. Literally no one was going to believe me. This is exactly the kind of story I told myself I'd never believe. I was all about pictures, evidence, and peer-reviewed testimony, and yet here I was, sitting in my car having missed the opportunity of a lifetime to prove that I saw something truly unexplainable. If it was a hallucination, I've never seen anything since. I've never been revisited by late-night specters or haunted by the ship that got away. I'm still skeptical because I truly can't believe what I saw with my own eyes. And now when people bring up their UFO stories of seeing a pinprick in the sky or some unusual orbs of light cascading across the heavens, I sadly recount my own tale of seeing a corporal ship. They always pretend to be interested, but secretly, I know they're rolling their eyes at me. As we come to the end of this edition of Midweek Mysteries, I'd like to say thank you to all of you for tuning in and supporting the podcast, and a special thank you goes out to Kelly, Mattie, Morgan, and Darina for writing in and sharing their experience with all of us. If you've witnessed something unexplainable and you'd like to have your story shared on the podcast, please contact me at paranormalmysteriespodcast@gmail.com or visit paranormalmysteriespodcast.com and click on the Tell Your Story link. All of our contact information can be found in the show notes. Until next time, I hope you all have a safe and healthy rest of the week, and we'll see you back here on Sunday with our next full-length episode. From all of us at the Paranormal Mysteries Podcast, thank you for listening, and please remember, don't wait for the unknown to come to you. Get out there and find it.